What is happening, everybody? My name is Bright Life. This is my fancy shirt. I'm going for a mid-2005 emo band vibe because I found this meme on Tumblr. And today we're going to talk about what you should play as far as classes go in Lord of the Rings Online in 2022. Let's jump into it. All right, so a lot of my viewers have been like me. We jumped back in during the 15th anniversary of LOTRO, and we've been pleasantly surprised. We have really enjoyed this game, and as we've dived back in and as the community has started to rise in population a little bit more, we've been really enjoying this game. And for me, as I've started to enjoy the game, I've started to research it, one of the things that I've found to be actually really impressive is the variety of classes. People don't talk about this in Lord of the Rings Online that much for some reason, but Lord of the Rings Online has done a great job with its class system. They have your classic classes that fulfill the typical fantasy of any MMORPG, but then they have some more unique classes ranging all the way to, I haven't seen anything like this in another MMORPG. And so I want to actually walk through these classes. I want to compare them to some other MMORPG classes, like classes from World of Warcraft, classes from Final Fantasy, so that if you're deciding to jump in and you don't know what to play, you can jump in with the right character for you. Now, as always, I do believe that the right character is the right character that you want to play, not necessarily something that's on meta. And that's very true in this game as well, because this game is a lot more about the journey to endgame than rushing to endgame and min-maxing a raid or something like that with your friends. It's really not about that. This game is about exploring and experiencing Middle-earth. So I always tell people to remember two things when picking a class in Lord of the Rings Online. The first thing is care a lot about the class lore. Every single one of these classes has something that connects them to the greater Lord of the Rings legendarium, and I think that's a really good thing. I think that from the outset, you should be ready to actually dive into the class fantasy in this game, because it's really, really good. The class fantasies are great, the story fantasies are great, and if you can connect yourself to the Lord of the Rings lore in as many ways as possible, I think that you're going to enjoy this game much more. Because when you're experiencing Weathertop, when you meet Tom Bombadil, when you go to Angmar and eventually all the way to Mordor, you want to be able to picture yourself in the Lord of the Rings world. And so that's my number one thing. The number two thing is this: care a lot more about that character fantasy. Not just the lore of the character, but the character fantasy. You want to be able to put yourself into this character because this is going to be your journey through Middle-earth. So as we walk through the types of classes that we have, be sure that you think about it and say, can I connect with the lore of this? And can I connect with the character, the fantasy element of this thing? So let's jump into it first with those classes that are a lot more classic to other MMORPGs. And the first one I want to talk about is Champion. Now, Champion is a physical DPS class. They're the class that runs in there and has two swords or one big massive two-hander sword and just smacks the heck out of everything there. Right now, champions are extremely overpowered in the meta, but that doesn't really matter. This is that class that you run in and just go after everything with your swords. This reminds me a lot of a warrior, an arms or fury warrior in World of Warcraft, with actually the ability to tank as well. The champion is a great off tank in the game right now. If you manage to hold a shield, you can hold quite a bit of aggro, especially if you go with the blue line captain trait tree. Now, as far as the gameplay goes, champions wade into battle swinging their weapons in all directions, dealing significant damage to many foes at once. With each strike, their fervor grows, allowing them to use even more potent skills. Special stances may be used to greatly increase damage dealt at the cost of defense or enhance defense at the cost of damage. In fellowships, a champion concentrates on engaging as many foes as possible. And so you can see that this really does fall in line with that Fury or Arms Warrior type, World of Warcraft character where you build up rage, or in this case, fervor, and then you expend it for big attacks. Now, the cool thing about the champion is it really does work on this kind of pendulum scale where if you do a lot more damage, you're gonna have a lot lower defense. But if you do a lot more defensive moves, you'll have lower damage. And I like that little balance in the champion class. Now, remember what we said about the lore of any of these classes is you need to be able to kind of connect with the lore, connect with that character fantasy. And so here's the lore of this character. Unrelenting in battle, champions are the consummate warriors. A champion cares not for his or her own well-being, but relies instead on strength and prowess to slay the enemy before they can bring further destruction to Middle-earth. This class is inspired by Gimli, son of Glóin, whose skills in arms match the bow skills of Legolas. Now again, this is a really cool one for those that love physical DPS, love to run in with two swords swinging, and can kind of connect with the Glóin Gimli class of like just running in there and going all out for this class. Now the next class is your Lore Master. This is defined as a more advanced skill level class, but it's really kind of like a mage in World of Warcraft. They use power in this game, or mana in another game, to summon spells that do big damage to the enemy. They're typically glass tanks. They've got the lowest defense of really any class in the game, but they're not really meant to be up in the middle of battle. They do big damage. They also are able to CC, crowd control adds in raids, and they're very essential in big raiding spots for end game content. They also are a pet class. They have a number of different kinds of pets. The first one you get is a bear. You can get a crow. There are lots of different pets that you can get, and it goes along with this idea that in Middle-earth, you are a master of the lore. You can train animals and partner with them in the defense of Middle-earth. It's a really cool idea. The gameplay notes are this. Lore masters are the masters of crowd control, skills that trap foes and keep them from fighting. They may call on animal companions to fight by their side and even call on elemental forces to damage foes. In fellowships, a lore master concentrates on supporting his or her allies primarily by hindering the foe's ability to deal damage. And so you can see that crowd control is a really big deal, some debuffs are a big deal, but they're a really big damage bearing class. Now, again, if you played mage in World of Warcraft, red mage, black mage in Final Fantasy, this is probably going to be something a little bit more akin to what you've played before. The lore of this class that you can connect to is, lore masters are seekers of knowledge and the guardians of wisdom. Through study of bygone ages, they learned ancient secrets that allow them to hinder foes as well as protect against the dark powers of the enemy. They have many skills that invoke the natural world of Middle-earth, but it is draining on their will, thus costing them morale to fuel some of these more powerful spells. And this class was inspired by Elrond Half-Elven, Elf-Lord, and Master of Rivendell. Now the next one's a classic, it's the Hunter. And it's kind of funny, they don't really even change the name of this class from a lot of other classes, and it's a lot like, of course, the Hunter in World of Warcraft, where it's a ranged physical DPS. You've got a bow, you can have crossbows in some instances, and you just knock down the enemy. And this is a really fun one for those that love, like, of course, thinking about Legolas and all that stuff, but they're a very cut and dry basic class. You are at range, you do big damage, you build up to huge damage, you use a meter called focus to actually, you build up some focus and then you utilize that focus to do even bigger attacks, but you do actually operate on the power system, which is very different from a lot of other classes. In World of Warcraft, you just have your focus. In this one, you actually build up your focus while utilizing mana or power in this instance. It's a really fun class, really good damage, and the gameplay notes are this. Hunters are proficient at dealing significant damage to a single foe at long range. Their basic bow skills generate focus, allowing them to use even more potent skills. If a foe manages to close into melee, the hunter's dual-wielded weapons are capable of dealing a final blow. And in fellowships, a hunter concentrates quickly on defeating foes one at a time. So again, it's a lot more about that single target damage. For a lot of people that love the class fantasy element of these games, it is cool that you get the dual wield. That kind of is reminiscent of Legolas with his two knives. And the lore is this. Hunters are masters of field and forest, unmatched in their dexterity with the bow. They use their survival skills to guide companions and lay traps for enemies. And the coming of the enemy has forced them to adapt these skills against new prey. This class was inspired by Legolas, Prince of Mirkwood, a mighty hunter and companion of Aragorn. Another cool thing about hunters that I really like is that they do have these travel abilities where they can recall the entire fellowship to different areas of Middle-earth, like Bree, like the Shire, places like that. And that's really helpful because this is a very large map, and the only swift travel that's available is at the Stable Masters for money. So if you have a hunter in your party, you can travel around a lot faster. And of course, if you're leveling as a hunter, you want to go as a solo character, this is kind of nice because you have all of those recall skills all over the map. All right, the next one is Guardian. This is the last of our really basic, just like other MMORPG classes. The Guardian is your basic sword and board or sword and shield tank. Back in the day, 15 years ago, when I actually played before, it was really the only good tank because that was really what it was about. Nowadays, they can operate as a tank, which is still one of their great strengths, but they can also operate in some other ways as well by taking on two-handed swords and actually dealing a good amount of damage, which is really cool. Now for the gameplay of the Guardian. Guardians wear heavy armor and have many defensive skills that allow them to survive battles against the most fearsome foes. Guardians also have skills that draw foes' attention away from their allies and themselves. And in Fellowships, a Guardian forces enemies to attack himself or herself, so his or her more fragile allies will not be harmed by foes. And so again, this is really the classic tank class. If you've played a warrior tank, if you played a paladin tank, you know what this is all about. It is a shield and a sword and a lot of shouts that make the enemy attack you, which is a really cool position, and it's a great basic tank. There are a lot more advanced tanks in this game, but this is a very basic level tank for you. And if you're looking for kind of that vanilla, I just love old school tanking, this may be the class for you. Now the lore of the Guardian, of course, is something to also connect with, and that is this. Guardians are the stout protectors of the weak, the defenders of those in need, and they are loyal companions to the end. True Guardians stand in the forefront of battle, shielding allies from enemy assaults. This class was inspired by the Hobbit Samwise Gamgee, whose loyalty to Frodo Baggins knew no bounds. And I love that. For those of you that love Sam, that want to be a protector, this could be a really great class fantasy for you to get into. All right, so now I want to move into these semi-unique classes. These are classes that exist in other games, but their ways of gameplay are actually unique to LOTRO, and I think it's a cool thing. So the first one is Burglars. Now, Burglars are your classic stealth physical DPS class. If you're looking to do a lot more PvP in the end game, Burglars are a lot of fun because you can stealth around the map and gank people, but they're also really good in Fellowships, and they are damage dealers, but they're very much all about those effects. So you can kind of picture them as like a mixture between, you know, a rogue in World of Warcraft and maybe like a warlock that does a little bit more of the damage over time stuff, maybe a little bit more of the debilitating attacks damage. So they kind of oscillate between a damage and damage over time and a support class too, which is a really cool thing. And we can see that when we look at the official gameplay notes of this class. Burglars are masters of debuffing, skills that cause foes to deal less damage or be easier to defeat. They utilize their trick skills to debuff foes and can later remove the tricks for additional benefits. Burglars also have stealth skills and are proficient in initiating fellowship maneuvers. In Fellowships, a burglar supports his or her allies by debuffing foes while dealing respectable damage. So again, if you're into that support class, maybe you always wish that your rogue in World of Warcraft could do a little bit more to support and help the raid out, this actually might be the right class for you. They're very, very good at what they do in that space. Now, the lore of this one obviously is derived from kind of the burglar himself, Bilbo Baggins, but I still think the notes are really cool. The lore is this. Burglars are masters of stealth and misdirection. They rely on sleight of hand and starting attacks that allow their companions to overwhelm adversaries. This class is inspired by the famous Bilbo Baggins, who accompanied Thorin and company on their quest to the Lonely Mountain. Again, this is a really cool class, and I really appreciate how this one is done because, of course, you see a lot of Hobbit burglars out there because they want to live out that fantasy of Bilbo Baggins. But for me, one of the reasons I think this is a cool semi-unique class is you still have that stealth and attack and jump out and overwhelm the enemy element of kind of the rogue from World of Warcraft. But on the other side, you also have a lot of really cool supportive abilities. Some of the largest, biggest damaging attacks, called fellowship maneuvers in Lord of the Rings Online, can be opened up by burglars, which I think is a really, really cool thing. And it allows the burglar to feel like they have a lot more to give in a fellowship or raid setting than maybe a rogue does, because a rogue is just all about pumping out as much damage as they can. Again, really cool class if that's what you're into. All right, the next semi-unique class is called the Brawler. Now, the Brawler is a really cool class because it's a great DPS and tank class. It's the newest class, so it's been given a lot of love, and it's very overpowered at this moment right now. Now, Brawlers use fist weapons. They kind of remind me of the Monk in World of Warcraft, but they have some cool things in the gameplay notes that make them a little bit more unique than the Monk in my mind, and I think it makes it really, really cool. The gameplay is that Brawlers are aggressive melee fighters who wield a unique resource called metal to maximize their damage and fuel their most powerful skills. Although their offensive capabilities truly shine in one-on-one combat, they are not without recourse when faced with multiple enemies. In Fellowships, a Brawler's abrasive nature helps them to hold the ire of their foes and keep their allies safe. The lore is Brawlers are formidable fighters who use bold maneuvers that can topple their foes and safeguard their allies. This class is inspired by Helm Hammerhand, who to the astonishment of many would take to the battlefield barehanded. Again, if you're kind of looking for that badass just running after people and beating them up with your fist class, Brawlers may be for you. So it is the newest class, so you do need the Goondabat expansion, or you can unlock this class with LOTRO points to use, but it is pretty overpowered right now, which is really fun for the leveling process. And if you're kind of into the monk, like, you know, just barehand fighting style, this one may be for you. All right, now let's jump into Minstrels. Now, Minstrels are the first healer class that we're gonna talk about in this video, and they're a very respectable healer class. Back in the vanilla days of Shadows of Angmar, they were the only healer class that existed, and they were really, really good at what they did. If you had 2 Minstrels in your raid, which of course you needed, you would not be wishing for another kind of healer. They can do just about everything. But what makes them unique is they also lean heavily into the buffs region, and they're also very musically based. I don't think there's any other MMO, and someone I'm sure in the comments is gonna let me know if there is. I haven't played them all, but I think most of the big MMOs, the healing is really based out of spells, but for the Minstrel, it's almost like the music is what keeps people going, which I think is a really cool thing. It's a very cool class fantasy to lean into, and things like their battle shouts and their heals over time and their just direct big heals all through music really allow it to be a very semi-unique class in my mind, and I think that's a really cool thing. Now, the gameplay notes for this class are Minstrels are known for healing abilities and are capable of dealing respectable damage with war speech. They have a variety of support skills and special ballads, and using a ballad unlocks more potent ballads, which can culminate with powerful anthems. In fellowships, a minstrel keeps his allies healed and supported. So you kind of get this building heal effect with the minstrel, which is a really cool thing. I like that about minstrels. It's not just, you know, throw a big heal like you would with a priest, or throw just a little heal over time as you would with a druid. You actually build up over time to massive anthem-like heals, which again is a really cool thing. If you like playing healers and like the sound of that, this could be the class for you. And again, they do have decently respectable damage, meaning that you can level solo as a minstrel and still level decently quickly, which you can't say for all healers in all MMORPGs. Now, the lore of this class is this. Middle-earth is a land deeply infused with music, and true minstrels are skilled at tapping into that power. They weave songs and tales so stirring that their companions' morale will not fail, and they will be driven to perform greater feats of prowess. They can even utter words of true power and ward against the forces of darkness with their anthems. This class was inspired by Luthien Tenuviel, whose elfin voice beguiled friend and foe alike. And again, I love that this taps into the idea that music is a huge part of Middle-earth, which it is, of course, and that's a really, really cool thing for the Tolkien fan. So if you want to play a healer and you really want to jump into that musical side of Middle-earth, this could be the class for you. All right, now let's talk about the Beorning. Now, the Beorning is a class that starts as a human and then moves into and morphs into a bear class. The Beorning is both a class and a race, and they're inspired by big old Beorn from the books. And again, really, really great class right now, pretty tip-top in everything. So if you are going for a meta class, the Beorning would be good for you. But they are tanks, they're DPS, and they're healers. And they really share a lot of similarities with the druids in World of Warcraft, where they can shapeshift, and then they use those different forms to actually do damage, or maybe tank or heal, but all of them are as a bear in this one. What makes them semi-unique in this space is that really they are tip-top in everything. A lot of the times when you roll a druid, you have to work really, really hard to get to that min-max level. Right now with Beornings, they're all pretty much tip-top in everything. At least as the more professional players tell me, they are really, really good right now. And so if you're looking for a class that you can really jump into and fulfill all the different roles very well, this is for you. Now, World of Warcraft players, don't get too mad at me. I know that you know how to play your role really well. If you're a healer druid, you're probably a fantastic one at that, and maybe not so great as a tank. Really, with the Beorning, you can be good at all three, and which is a really, really cool thing. Now, the gameplay notes for the Beorning are this. Beornings are skin changers that can change into the form of a bear in combat. They focus their wrath while in bear form, choosing to deal grievous blows or bolster their own resolve. While skilled in combat, some Beornings also choose to wield their knowledge of the wilderness to assist their allies. And the lore is the Beornings of Middle-earth are a largely reclusive people. They trace their ancestry back to Beorn himself and spend most of their time deep in the wilderness. The solitude of the forest gives little comfort in recent times, with the enemy encroaching from all sides. The time has come for the descendants of Beorn to lend their strength to the free peoples of Middle-earth. This class is inspired by Beorning, who bravely stood with the Free Peoples during the Battle of the Five Armies. Again, it's a really cool class in the class fantasy realm because, you know, these Beornings are almost reluctantly dragged into the fight, but are fierce once they're there, and they're really good at everything they do. So if that sounds like something that would be good to you, let me know in the comments below and let me know if you choose that class. All right, now let's move on to the more unique classes in LOTRO, and this is where I really appreciate that the Lord of the Rings Online crew has allowed their abilities as class creators to thrive. I think with these three classes in particular, they said, hey, I've got an idea, let's run with it. And so for me, I really respect those, so I like all three of these classes quite a bit, but we'll see if you like them as well. But let's start out with the Captain. Now the Captain is a heavy armor wearing two-hand sword wielding class, and they really exist to buff their allies. They can be DPS or they can be tank, but they're really cool because they kind of fit into this Boromir, Aragorn lore category, where they also have companions with them, and their battle cries, their shouts, their companions, they all buff their allies to the point where you might be foolish to walk into a raid without a captain, because captains bring so many great buffs to the team, but they also can deal pretty respectable damage. They can tank as well, and it's a really cool thing that they can also be kind of like a pet class in a way. They're a very cool class. They're very unique in how they operate. They exist to buff their allies, and I think that's a really cool thing. For those of you that are looking for a class that can do some off heals, that can tank really well, and can also do pretty respectable DPS, the Captain might be for you. Now the gameplay notes for Captain are this. Captains are armored melee fighters and masters of buffing, skills that enhance allies. They may summon a herald companion to fight by their side, ensuring that they always have an ally to buff. They can also mark foes, giving benefits to all who attack them. In fellowships, a captain supports his or her allies with healing and buffs, while still dealing respectable damage. Now the lore behind the Captain is the captains of Middle-earth hold the future in their hands. By both their own strength of arms and the inspiration they instill in others, they must lead the Free Peoples to victory. This class is inspired by Arnor, the last king of Gondor, who was revered as both a captain skilled in arms and as a lore master. Again, the reason I think this class is so unique in the way that it does it is because it acts maybe a little bit like a paladin with buffs, but it leans into that so fully that the class just becomes all about buffs. Like, this class is there to support the fellowship. And for a lot of you guys that love playing supporting roles, I would encourage you to give the Captain a try. Because they have heavy armor and they can do good damage, the leveling process is really fun. The lore element of the Captain being like Arnor, maybe even Boromir or Aragorn, these lords, these captains of men, it can be a really cool class to really get into, and it's definitely going to be the next class that I level. All right, now the next really unique class that I've really enjoyed trying out as I've tried it out is the Rune Keeper. Now, at first glance, the Rune Keeper may either seem like a ranged mage DPS or a healer, but it's the way that it happens that makes it really unique, and I really like this, and it's called the Attunement panel. Now, when you roll a Rune Keeper, you're going to immediately be given healing spells and damaging spells. And what happens is, as you use your damaging spells, you actually build your attunement to damage, which allows you to do much greater level of damaging skills. Now, what that also does is it takes away from your healing attunement. It's kind of like a big balancing act. And so if you do lots of damage and then you want to throw a heal at somebody, you may not even be able to use the heal skill because you're so attuned into damage. But on the other hand, if you start healing people and you want to throw a quick attack, you may find that those attacks are very diminished, or you just can't use them at all because your healing attunement is so high. And I like that ability. I like that idea. It's a really cool thing. The class animations are really, really cool. The lightning strikes especially, get ready for those if you roll a Rune Keeper. But it allows you to play both at the same time and really enjoy it. So the gameplay notes for the Rune Keeper are: Rune Keepers must choose during each battle to focus on damaging skills or healing skills. Either choice shifts their attunement, unlocking more potent skills, but the choice also restricts access to other skills. In addition, they have support skills that may always be used, and in fellowships, a Rune Keeper keeps allies healed or deals significant damage to foes. Now, the lore is that the Rune Keepers are gifted linguists and masters of true names. With this knowledge, a Rune Keeper crafts powerful rune words that help the Free Peoples. Through unparalleled mastery of Agarthos and Tangwar runes, a Rune Keeper evokes much more than a normal scribe. Dagor runes deal with battle, Nestad with healing, and Thalos with support. The class is inspired by the elf smith Celebrimbor, whose skill with runes of powered was unparalleled. Again, if you're looking for a little bit more of a unique mage class that can also heal and support, this could be the class for you. All right, and the last class that we need to talk about is my favorite class because it's my main. It's the Warden class. Now, the Warden is a really cool class. The Warden starts out with a spear and a shield and is very much lives and dies by this thing called the Gambit system. Now, the Gambit system starts out with really basic attacks, and as you put those attacks into a 5-attack Gambit system, you're able to do more and more powerful attacks. And how you mix up the order of when you do those attacks and slot them into the Gambit system, you'll find that your attacks can heal you, they can taunt enemies, they can do damage over time, or they can just do big single target damage, or they can do AoE damage. It's a really cool damaging class that can also do a little bit of tanking on the side, but I've played the Warden for a while and I found it to be really unique and really fun. It's a cool and engaging class because no combat is just like, pressing 3 and then pressing 1 and then 4 when you build up your big attack, and then back to pressing 3 and 1 until you build up your 4. That's really cool about the Warden is that, if you need a heal, you need to put in a different gambit and then use the heal skill, and oh, now you need a damage over time. You can put that in and then do that. It kind of mixes up almost like a fighting game combo with an MMORPG type of combat, and I found it to be really, really engaging and rewarding. Now, it's a lot harder of a class to play because of that, but I found it to be a lot more rewarding because if you do it right, you can be extremely survivable, and you can also do pretty respectable damage as well. Now, the gameplay notes this. Wardens are mobile, melee combatants who use javelins for initiating combat against ranged foes. Their unique Warden shield and a variety of defensive skills allows them to stay in the fight longer than most. Basic Warden skills build up their Gambit chain, which can be spent to unleash special Gambit skills. In fellowships, a Warden forces enemies to attack themselves, so their more fragile allies may not be harmed by foes. Now, the lore is the Warden patrols the borders of civilized lands, preventing the encroachment of fell creatures from the wild. They limit themselves to medium armor so they can travel swiftly and silently to defend those they protect from threats. Wardens all have some military training and have mastered a style of combat that uses combinations of basic attacks to create masterful gambits. This class was inspired by the March Warden of Lothlorien, Haldir, and his brothers Rumil and Orofin. And so I really find that class really cool because, again, it's all about defending allies, getting places quickly, building up those gambits, and then unleashing powerful attacks, which is a very rewarding type of system. And so if that sounds cool to you, that might be the one for you. All right, now wrapping up, I'm sure there's some things that I missed, but I hope I gave you a really interesting, unique perspective into these classes by reading to you the gameplay notes, bringing the lore to you, but also kind of bringing in some comparisons to other MMORPGs. I've had a great time playing this game, and I hope that as you jump in or maybe roll a new class, you find yourself really enjoying it as well. So I want to actually pass the question off to you. What class would you choose if you could choose any of the classes that I just talked about? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. But friends, as always, I just want to say thank you so much for watching. It means the world to me. Leave a comment below, let me know, because I always read those. Hit me a subscribe button if you want to see more videos like this. And as always, friends, you are more loved than you know, and you are so much more valuable than you realize. I hope you have an incredible day, and I will talk to you in the next one. Hey, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, leave it a like. It's totally free to do. Subscribe if you want to see more. And as always, I'm live on Twitch over at twitch.tv/brightlifecommunity. We're a community of positive and uplifting gamers. Come find a friend to raid with, grab loot with, and just enjoy life together with. Hope you have an awesome day. Be blessed, and you are so loved and so valuable.